The desert whispered death through cracked lips and sun-scorched terrain. Olivia Mercer lay motionless as blood pooled beneath her tactical vest, the enemy's bullets having found their mark not once, but twice. What should have been her end became the beginning of the most extraordinary comeback in special operations history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The forward operating base Chimera sat like a mirage against the Afghan mountains, its concrete barriers and razor wire forming an uneasy island amid hostile territory. For 6 months, Task Force Obsidian had operated from this remote outpost, conducting high-risk reconnaissance and counter-insurgency operations across the valley. The base itself was Spartan, shipping containers converted to barracks, a mess hall that doubled as an operations center, and a medical facility barely larger than a supply closet. Olivia didn't mind the austerity. After 15 years in special forces, comfort was a luxury she'd learned to live without. What mattered was the mission, and her 4-person reconnaissance team had become the backbone of intelligence gathering throughout the region. Their latest assignment had seemed routine. Observe a suspected arms cache in the foothills, document activity, and extract without engagement. Weather's holding at 104 degrees, visibility excellent, Captain Harris had noted during the final briefing. Insertion at 0200, expected 8-hour observation window, extraction before sunset. Olivia had nodded, already mentally mapping the terrain. As the team's senior sniper and reconnaissance specialist, she'd earned the call sign Phantom for her ability to observe undetected for days on end. Her spotter, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, had been her eyes and ears for 3 deployments. They communicated in half-sentences and shared glances that spoke volumes. "Terrain's unforgiving," she'd remarked, tracing the ridgeline on the satellite image. "We'll need to establish position here." Her finger rested on a rocky outcrop overlooking the suspected cache site. "Minimum 12 hours before anyone approaches that valley." Colonel Reynolds, the task force commander, had studied her face for a moment. "Intelligence suggests increased activity in the area. Could be nothing, could be something. Either way, maintain distance and observe only. This isn't an engagement mission." The team had departed under cover of darkness, their night vision turning the harsh landscape into an eerie green panorama of shadows and shapes. 4 operators moving like ghosts across terrain that would break lesser soldiers. It was what they were trained for, what they excelled at. Their observation point was perfect, a natural rock formation that provided cover and concealment while offering an unobstructed view of the valley below. Olivia and Marcus set up their position with practiced efficiency, the Remington MSR sniper rifle assembled and zeroed before the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. Sergeants Wilson and Torres established a secure perimeter and communications relay, ensuring their intelligence would reach the FOB regardless of conditions. "Movement at the tree line, bearing 045. Marcus whispered as the morning sun cast long shadows across the valley. 2 individuals, armed, moving toward the cave entrance. Olivia adjusted her scope, her breathing shallow and controlled. Confirmed. Same pattern as yesterday. They're checking the perimeter before the main group arrives. For 6 hours, they documented every movement, every exchange. What began as routine observation slowly revealed something more significant. Not just small arms being moved, but sophisticated anti-aircraft systems. The kind that could bring down coalition helicopters and change the balance of power throughout the region. "This isn't a cache," Marcus murmured, his voice tight with tension. "It's a staging area for something bigger." Olivia nodded, capturing high-resolution images through her scope. "We need to transmit this now." Torres, encrypted burst transmission to Chimera. Priority Alpha. Sergeant Torres acknowledged quietly, his fingers working the communications equipment with practiced precision. Transmission sent. Awaiting confirmation. The confirmation never came. The first indication something was wrong was the silence. A sudden absence of bird calls, the natural ambient sounds of the mountains falling away as if the landscape itself was holding its breath. Olivia felt it before she heard anything, that 6th sense developed through years of operations in hostile territory. "Something's off," she whispered, her eyes scanning the surrounding terrain through her scope. "We're being watched." Marcus shifted slightly, adjusting his spotting scope to survey their flanks. "Nothing on the perimeter, but I've got the same feeling. Maybe we should." The crack of a high-caliber rifle split the air a fraction of a second before impact. The round struck their position with surgical precision, sending rock fragments flying as the team instinctively pressed lower into their cover. "Sniper!" Marcus hissed, his voice tight with controlled urgency. Distance approximately 900 meters, bearing 210. Olivia's mind raced through calculations: wind speed, elevation, angle of impact. This wasn't random fire. This was a professional hunter who had somehow detected their position despite every precaution they'd taken. "We need to relocate," she said, already preparing to disassemble her rifle. "Torres, alert Chimera that we're compromised. Wilson, secure our exfil route." The second shot came as Torres reached for the communications equipment. This one struck with devastating accuracy, tearing through the rocky cover and catching Torres in the shoulder, spinning him around before he collapsed beside the radio. "Man down!" Wilson called, already moving to provide medical aid. Radios hit too. Olivia made a split-second decision. "Wilson, get Torres mobile. Marcus, cover fire on my mark." "We're moving to secondary position." The team had trained for compromise scenarios countless times, but reality always carried variables no simulation could replicate. As Wilson secured a pressure bandage to Torres's wound, Olivia located the enemy sniper's position, a natural depression in the opposite ridgeline, partially concealed by scrub brush and perfectly positioned to control the valley. "Professional setup," she muttered, noting the minimal signature. "Military trained, not insurgent." Marcus nodded grimly. "Foreign contractor, maybe? We've had reports of mercenary snipers operating in the region. Whoever he is, he's got us pinned with superior position. We need to create distance and confusion." Olivia reached into her pack and removed a remote detonated distraction device. Not lethal, but capable of creating enough smoke and sound to cover their movement. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute." The device detonated with a sharp crack and billowing smoke, and the team moved with practiced coordination. Torres gritted his teeth against the pain as Wilson supported him, while Marcus provided covering fire toward the enemy position. Olivia brought up the rear, her rifle at the ready, as they navigated the treacherous descent toward their secondary position. They had covered perhaps 50 meters when the third shot came, this one striking a rock near Olivia's head, showering her with fragments. The enemy sniper had adjusted with remarkable speed, tracking their movement despite the smoke screen. "He's good," she acknowledged grimly. "Too good." The secondary position offered marginally better cover, a depression flanked by boulders that shielded them from direct fire but also limited their options for movement. Torres's condition was deteriorating, his face pale beneath the tactical paint, as Wilson administered morphine and checked the bandage. "Bleeding's controlled," Wilson reported, "but he needs evac soon." That round fragmented on impact. Olivia assessed their situation with cold precision. No radio contact with base. One team member seriously wounded. An enemy sniper with superior position preventing their movement. And below in the valley, a significant arms cache with increasing activity that needed to be reported. "Marcus, I need you to get Torres and Wilson to the emergency extraction point," she said finally. "I'll create a diversion and join you there." Marcus stared at her. "That's not the protocol, and you know it. We don't separate." "Protocol doesn't account for being hunted by a superior force, with a wounded man and critical intelligence," she countered. "I'll buy you the time you need to reach the extraction point and signal for emergency evac." The argument that followed was brief but intense. Professional disagreement between operators who respected each other too much to waste time on ego. In the end, Olivia's rank and experience prevailed, though Marcus extracted a promise. 1 hour, he insisted. "If you're not at the extraction point in 1 hour, I'm coming back for you." Olivia nodded, already calculating trajectories and timing. 1 hour is all I need. Now go." As her team prepared to move, Olivia outlined her plan. She would create multiple distractions across their original position, drawing the enemy sniper's attention while the others moved toward extraction. Once they had sufficient distance, she would attempt to flank the enemy position and neutralize the threat before rejoining the team. "It's a solid plan," Wilson acknowledged, adjusting Torres's bandage one final time. "It's the only plan," Olivia corrected. "Now move out. Stay low, stay fast." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As her team disappeared into the rocky terrain, Olivia began executing her diversion. Using remote triggers and carefully positioned equipment, she created the impression of movement across multiple locations, forcing the enemy sniper to divide his attention. Each false target bought precious minutes for her team to put distance between themselves and danger. For 20 minutes, she maintained the deception, carefully timing each distraction to mimic the movement patterns of operators in the field. The enemy sniper was disciplined, taking only calculated shots at the most convincing decoys. This confirmed Olivia's suspicion. They were facing a professional with military-grade training and equipment. When she judged her team had sufficient head start, Olivia began her own movement, not toward the extraction point, but in a wide arc that would eventually bring her to the enemy's flank. It was a dangerous gambit, exposing herself to potential detection, but the alternative meant leaving a deadly threat in place to hunt other coalition forces. The terrain was brutally unforgiving, loose scree that threatened to announce her position with every step, exposed sections where even staying prone offered minimal concealment, and the relentless sun beating down, testing her endurance with each passing minute. Olivia moved with painstaking patience, sometimes covering no more than a few meters over several minutes. Her body pressed so close to the earth, she could taste the mineral tang of dust with each careful breath. Her route took her through a dried riverbed that offered concealment, but also funneled her movement in predictable ways, a dangerous compromise she accepted out of necessity. She had covered perhaps half the distance to her planned flanking position when instinct made her freeze in place, her body becoming as still as the rocks surrounding her. Something had changed in the air, a subtle shift in pressure that her years of experience translated into warning. Slowly, with infinitesimal care, she turned her head just enough to scan her surroundings without creating movement that would catch the eye. Nothing. Yet the feeling persisted, that prickling awareness at the base of her skull that had saved her life countless times before. Olivia remained motionless, controlling her breathing to the shallowest possible intake, her muscles tensed for immediate action. The shot, when it came, was almost anticlimactic, a supersonic crack followed by impact before her conscious mind registered the sound. The round struck her left side, just below the tactical vest, the force spinning her against the rocky ground. Pain exploded through her body, bright and immediate, but training overrode reflex. Instead of crying out, she controlled her fall, using the momentum to roll behind a larger rock formation. "Stupid," she hissed through gritted teeth, pressing her hand against the wound. Got predictable. Blood seeped between her fingers, warm and alarmingly copious. The round had found the gap in her protective gear with uncanny precision, another confirmation that their adversary was exceptional. Olivia applied a self-adhesive combat dressing from her medical kit, wincing as the hemostatic agent made contact with torn flesh. The wound was serious, but not immediately fatal. The bullet had passed through soft tissue without hitting major organs or arteries. She could still function, still complete the mission, but her margin for error had just narrowed dramatically. More concerning was the implication. The enemy sniper had anticipated her flanking maneuver, had perhaps been tracking her all along while maintaining the illusion of focus on her original position. This wasn't just skill, this was calculated psychological warfare. Olivia reassessed her situation with brutal honesty. Direct approach was now impossible. Her wound would slow her movement and compromise her shooting stability. The enemy held every advantage, position, condition, and now the initiative. Time for a change in tactics. She activated her backup communication device, a short-range encrypted transmitter that might reach Marcus if he was monitoring the emergency frequency. The message was brief. Phantom compromised. Continue extraction. Will rendezvous alternate site. Authentication code, Sierra Echo Delta. Whether the message reached her team was uncertain, but protocol dictated they proceed with evacuation regardless. Torres needed medical attention beyond what field treatment could provide, and the intelligence they'd gathered was too valuable to risk losing. Olivia was on her own, exactly as she'd planned, though not quite under the circumstances she'd anticipated. The sun had begun its descent toward the western mountains, casting lengthening shadows across the valley. In 3 hours, darkness would provide additional cover for movement, but Olivia knew waiting carried its own risks. Blood loss would eventually affect her performance, and the enemy sniper clearly had equipment for low-light operations. She needed to act now, while she still commanded her full faculties. The standard approach would be to withdraw, to prioritize survival and return with reinforcements. That option wasn't available. By the time a QRF could deploy, the arms cache would be relocated, and the enemy sniper long gone. The mission parameters had changed from observation to elimination of threat. Olivia checked her equipment with methodical precision. Her Remington MSR remained functional, though she'd lost some ancillary equipment during her evasive movement. She had limited ammunition, 8 rounds in the magazine plus 5 in reserve. Her sidearm was intact with a full magazine plus 2 spares. Various tactical tools remained accessible in her vest pockets, including night vision equipment, signaling devices, and her combat knife. Most valuable was her knowledge of the terrain, and her adversary's demonstrated behavior patterns. The enemy sniper had revealed 3 things: exceptional marksmanship, sophisticated equipment, and a tendency toward patience over opportunism. He took only calculated shots with high probability of success, suggesting both professional discipline and confidence in his position's security. Olivia formulated her plan around these observations. Direct confrontation was suicide. Evasion merely postponed the inevitable. The only viable option was to use the enemy's strengths against him, to create a scenario where his confidence became vulnerability. She began by establishing false positions, carefully arranged equipment and clothing that might register as human presence on thermal imaging. Each was positioned to suggest an injured operator attempting to find cover, creating a breadcrumb trail leading away from her actual route. As she worked, Olivia maintained awareness of her deteriorating physical condition. The bandage on her side was already soaked through, requiring a second dressing applied over the first. Her movements were becoming less fluid, her reactions fractionally slower. Time was becoming an enemy as dangerous as the sniper tracking her. With her decoys in place, Olivia began her true approach, not toward the enemy's last known position, but toward the most likely fallback location a professional would select when his primary hide was potentially compromised. This meant moving higher up the ridgeline into more exposed terrain where every movement carried greater risk of detection. The path she chose took advantage of natural features, shadow lines, vegetation clusters, and rock formations that broke up her silhouette. Progress was agonizingly slow, measured in breaths rather than meters. Her body pressed so close to the earth that stone edges carved fresh bruises into her flesh with each incremental shift. 50 minutes into her approach, the enemy revealed his position with a single shot fired at one of her decoys. The muzzle flash was brief but unmistakable, a momentary signature that confirmed what Olivia had suspected. The shooter had relocated to higher ground, establishing a position that commanded even greater coverage of the valley floor. Now she had him. The new position was tactically superior but logistically vulnerable. The higher ridgeline offered fewer escape routes and, crucially, limited access to water. A professional operating alone would need to maintain hydration, meaning equipment that could be targeted. Olivia adjusted her course accordingly, using a narrow ravine to gain elevation while remaining concealed from the enemy's likely field of view. The climb was excruciating, her wounded side protesting with each vertical meter gained. Twice she had to stop and reinforce the dressing as blood seeped through the tactical fabric. The second shot hit her as she emerged from the ravine. This time the impact was lower, catching her in the upper thigh with enough force to slam her against the rock wall. Fresh pain exploded through her nervous system, momentarily whiting out her vision as she fought to maintain consciousness. The round had struck at an angle, tearing through muscle rather than bone, but the damage was severe, blood pulsing from the wound in rhythmic spurts that indicated arterial involvement. Olivia applied a tourniquet with practiced efficiency, her fingers moving through the procedure while her mind processed the tactical implications. The shot had come from an unexpected angle, not from the position she'd identified, but from somewhere to the east, suggesting either multiple shooters or a level of mobility she hadn't anticipated. Her situation had deteriorated from challenging to critical. 2 significant wounds, limited mobility, and an enemy who seemed to anticipate her every move. For the first time, Olivia confronted the possibility that this mission might end with her death rather than her success. The thought brought neither fear nor resignation, only a cold, analytical clarity that distilled her options to their essence. She could no longer outmaneuver her adversary physically. Her only remaining advantage lay in psychological warfare and the willingness to accept risks no rational operator would consider. As blood soaked through her tactical pants, staining the dust beneath her position, Olivia made her decision. If she couldn't reach the enemy, she would force the enemy to come to her. Using her remaining equipment, she created a medical distress signal, the universal indicator that a wounded soldier was requesting emergency extraction. It was a calculated risk that violated every protocol of covert operations, but it also presented a target no professional hunter could ignore: a wounded high-value operator with potential intelligence, awaiting rescue. With the signal established, Olivia dragged herself to a defensible position 20 meters away, a natural depression flanked by boulders that provided multiple firing angles while offering concealment from aerial observation. There, she prepared her final stand, arranging equipment for maximum efficiency despite her compromised mobility. The waiting was the hardest part, each minute bringing increased blood loss and diminished physical capability. Olivia focused on controlling her breathing, using meditation techniques to manage pain and maintain alertness despite her body's deteriorating condition. She monitored the valley below with her scope, tracking movement around the arms cache while maintaining peripheral awareness of her immediate surroundings. An hour passed, then two. The sun touched the western mountains, casting long shadows across the valley that transformed familiar terrain into an alien landscape of darkness and deceptive shapes. Olivia checked her bandages, tightened the tourniquet, and consumed half her remaining water. Her body temperature had begun to fall, the first warning sign of significant blood loss. Just as twilight deepened into true darkness, movement registered at the edge of her vision, a shadow detaching from shadow, advancing with the patient precision of a predator confident in its superiority. Through her scope, Olivia caught glimpses of high-end tactical gear, a face obscured by advanced night vision equipment, and the unmistakable silhouette of a specialized sniper rifle. The hunter had arrived, drawn by the prospect of confirming his kill and perhaps extracting valuable intelligence from a wounded enemy. Now Olivia would discover if her final gambit would succeed, or if she had merely hastened her own end. The approaching figure moved with exceptional discipline, using available cover and maintaining irregular intervals between movements to prevent predictable timing. This was no amateur, but a professional who understood the dangers of approaching a wounded operator, no matter how compromised they might appear. Olivia remained motionless, controlling her breathing to prevent even the slightest movement that might betray her position. Through her scope, she tracked the enemy's approach, noting equipment details that confirmed her earlier assessment: foreign-made tactical gear, specialized night vision, and a rifle that appeared custom-built for long-range precision shooting. At 40 meters, the figure paused, conducting a methodical scan of the area surrounding the distress signal. Olivia felt the weight of that gaze passing over her position, sensed the moment when professional instinct warred with the evidence presented. The distress signal showed clear signs of a wounded operator, but the surrounding terrain offered too many potential ambush positions for direct approach. The standoff extended for almost 10 minutes. Hunter and hunted locked in a psychological battle where the slightest error meant death. Olivia's finger rested lightly on her trigger, her breathing shallow and controlled despite the fire burning through her wounded side and leg. Then the enemy made his decision, adjusting his approach to circle toward the distress signal from the eastern flank, a tactically sound choice that unfortunately brought him directly into Olivia's prepared kill zone. She waited until he was fully committed to the approach, until turning back would expose him more than continuing forward. Only then did she exhale softly, center her crosshairs on his center mass, and apply gentle pressure to the trigger. The shot broke the night silence with percussive finality. Through her scope, Olivia saw the impact. The enemy sniper thrown sideways by the force of the round, striking his upper chest at the edge of his protective vest. Not a kill shot, but a devastating wound that sent him sprawling behind a rock formation, his rifle clattering against stone as he fell. Olivia adjusted her position immediately, anticipating return fire once the initial shock subsided. Her wounded leg screamed in protest as she dragged herself to a secondary firing position, leaving a smear of blood across the rocky ground. For several minutes, silence reclaimed the mountainside. broken only by the faint whisper of wind through scrub brush and the distant calls of night birds resuming their activities. Then came movement, the unmistakable sound of equipment being dragged across stone, followed by labored breathing that carried clearly in the still air. "Impressive shot," a voice called out, the accent suggesting Eastern European origins. "Not many could manage that with injuries like yours." Olivia remained silent, adjusting her scope to locate the source of the voice without exposing herself to potential counterfire. "We are at an impasse, you and I," the voice continued. "Both wounded, both running out of time. Perhaps we could negotiate?" "Nothing to negotiate," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the pain coursing through her body. "You've been targeting coalition forces for months. That ends tonight." A harsh laugh echoed across the rocks. "So righteous. You think your side has moral superiority?" "We're the same, you and I. Professional soldiers following orders, playing a game where governments set the rules and we die for their objectives." Through her scope, Olivia located a blood trail leading behind a large boulder, 30 meters from her position. The enemy sniper had managed to drag himself to cover, but the trail suggested significant bleeding, his wound possibly as severe as her own. "Difference is," she responded, adjusting her aim to cover likely movement paths, "I don't target medical evacuations or shoot wounded operators trying to extract." Silence followed, then the metallic sound of a magazine being checked, confirmation that the enemy remained combat effective despite his injury. "Your team is gone," he said finally. "Helicopter extracted them an hour ago. No one is coming back for you. We both know protocol for compromised operators behind enemy lines." He was right, and they both knew it. Standard procedure dictated that compromised reconnaissance teams not receive secondary extraction attempts. The risk to additional personnel was deemed unacceptable against the potential recovery of a single operator. "Then we both die here," Olivia stated flatly. "Unless you have another suggestion?" The standoff continued as darkness deepened across the mountainside. In the valley below, activity around the arms cache had increased. Vehicles arriving, equipment being transferred under the cover of night. The intelligence Olivia had gathered was already making its way back to command, which meant airstrikes would likely be authorized within hours. Neither she nor the enemy sniper would survive if they remained in the target zone. "Perhaps a professional courtesy," the voice suggested after several minutes of silence. "You have your mission, I have mine. Neither of us benefits from mutual destruction." Olivia considered the proposal, weighing options against dwindling resources. Her wounds continued to seep blood despite the tourniquets and pressure bandages. Within hours, shock would begin to affect her cognitive functions. The enemy sniper likely faced similar deterioration. "What exactly are you proposing?" she called back, maintaining her coverage of his position. "Temporary ceasefire. We both extract to our respective support zones. Live to fight another day, as they say." It was a tempting offer. Survival always was, but Olivia recognized the tactical deception. Any movement from her current position would expose her to a clear shot, regardless of any verbal agreement. The enemy sniper had demonstrated his exceptional skill and lack of ethical constraints throughout their encounter. "Counter-proposal," she replied. "Surrender your weapon, and I ensure medical evacuation through coalition channels. Otherwise, we continue until one or both of us bleed out on this mountainside." The silence that followed was heavier, charged with calculation and the weight of professional pride. Olivia used the pause to check her bandages. The thigh wound had soaked through its second dressing, while her side continued to seep steadily. Time was becoming her most dangerous adversary. Movement caught her attention, not from the boulder concealing the enemy sniper, but from further down the slope. Through her night vision, she detected multiple heat signatures advancing up the mountainside with tactical precision. Not coalition forces. Their movement patterns indicated local militia aligned with the arms cache operation below. "Your reinforcements have arrived," she observed, adjusting her scope to track the new threat. "Interesting timing." A harsh laugh echoed across the rocks. "Not mine. Those would be the cache security team. They hunt anything that threatens their operation, including foreign contractors like myself." Olivia processed this information rapidly. If true, it transformed the tactical situation entirely. Both she and the enemy sniper now faced a common threat, with neither in condition to combat multiple attackers independently. "How many?" she asked. already calculating ammunition and positioning. "I count 8, came the reply. Professional assessment temporarily overriding adversarial status. Well armed but poorly trained. They'll use numbers and terrain knowledge to compensate." Olivia made her decision in an instant, not from trust but from cold tactical necessity. "Your rifle. What model?" "Chaytak Intervention. Custom barrel, advanced thermal. Why?" "Because mine is standard issue with limited ammunition," she replied, already formulating a desperate plan. "And we need every advantage if we're getting off this mountain alive." The enemy sniper fell silent, likely conducting the same mental calculations Olivia had just completed. Their mutual destruction served neither's interests, while temporary collaboration offered the only realistic chance of survival against superior numbers. "Temporary alliance," he finally agreed, "until the immediate threat is neutralized." "Agreed, but I'll need your rifle." Another pause, longer this time. "Why would I trust you with my weapon?" "Because your wound prevents effective firing from cover, while mine still allows for stationary marksmanship," Olivia explained with clinical detachment. "And because that rifle's superior thermal capabilities give us the only advantage against multiple hostiles in darkness." The advancing militia had reached a plateau 200 meters below their position, spreading out in a standard search pattern that would eventually encompass both their locations. Time was running critically short. "Decision time," Olivia pressed. "Die separately or survive together." A moment later came the response, not in words but in action. A rifle slid into view from behind the boulder, pushed forward with deliberate care to land in an exposed position between them. The Chaytak Intervention gleamed darkly in the moonlight, its specialized scope representing technology beyond standard military issue. 8 rounds remaining. The voice called out. "Make them count." Retrieving the weapon meant exposing herself to potential betrayal, a calculated risk that epitomized the desperate nature of their situation. Olivia dragged herself forward, ignoring the tearing sensation in her wounded thigh as she covered the distance to secure the rifle. The weapon was heavier than her Remington, its balance and grip subtly different in ways that would affect precision shooting. Most significant was the advanced thermal scope, a model she recognized as military-grade equipment restricted to specialized units and high-end contractors. "Your name?" she asked, checking the chamber and familiarizing herself with the action. "Does it matter? If we survive, I'll need to know who I'm hunting next time." A soft laugh carried across the darkness. "Alexei. And yours?" "Olivia," she replied, settling into a firing position that accommodated her injuries while providing maximum coverage of the approaching threats. "Now let's get to work." Through Alexei's thermal scope, the approaching militia appeared as bright silhouettes against the cooler landscape. 8 figures advancing with more confidence than caution, their weapons held casually despite the unknown threats potentially waiting in the darkness. Olivia steadied her breathing, adjusting to the unfamiliar weight and balance of the Chaytak rifle, while calculating trajectories against the militia's movement pattern. "They're using a standard sweep formation," she whispered, knowing Alexei could hear her from his position. 2 teams of 4, maintaining visual contact but spreading wide enough to cover maximum terrain. "Mountain tribes," Alexei confirmed, his voice strained from pain and blood loss. "They know every cave and crevice. Direct confrontation is suicide." Olivia nodded, though he couldn't see the gesture. "We need to disrupt their coordination, create confusion, then exploit the chaos to break through their line." The militia's advance continued methodically, their heat signatures growing brighter as they closed the distance. They moved with the confident ease of predators who believed their prey was already cornered, wounded and desperate. "I'll target the eastern flank," Olivia decided, centering the crosshairs on the militia member farthest from the main group. "When they scatter for cover, you throw the flashbangs toward the western approach. That should create enough confusion for extraction." "Bold strategy," Alexei commented, "considering neither of us can run." Despite the dire circumstances, Olivia felt a grim smile form. "Who said anything about running?" The first shot broke the night's silence with thunderous finality. Through the advanced thermal scope, Olivia watched the targeted militiaman drop instantly, a clean shot that eliminated the threat without giving him time to alert the others. The remaining 7 froze momentarily, instinct making them still before training kicked in. "Moving to cover," Alexei reported, his voice tight with controlled pain. "Flashbangs ready." Olivia adjusted her aim to the militia's apparent leader, who was gesturing frantically for his men to spread out and locate the shooter. Her second shot caught him in the chest, the impact throwing him backward as chaos erupted among the remaining forces. "Now!" she called, already shifting to a new firing position despite the tearing pain in her thigh. 2 flashbang grenades arced through the darkness, their trajectory perfectly calculated to land among the scattered militia members. The dual explosions transformed night into blinding day, the concussive force amplified by the rocky terrain. Disoriented shouts echoed across the mountainside as the militia fired blindly into the darkness, their disciplined formation disintegrating into panicked individuals. Olivia used the confusion to eliminate 2 more threats with methodical precision, each shot placed with the calm detachment that had made her phantom in the field. 4 down, 4 remaining, but the advantage of surprise was rapidly diminishing. "We need to move," she called to Alexei. "They'll regroup within minutes." "Slight problem with that plan," came the strained reply. "I've lost too much blood for mobility." Olivia checked the remaining ammunition in the Chaytak, 3 rounds in the magazine. Her own sidearm had a full magazine, plus 2 spares. Not enough for a prolonged engagement, but potentially sufficient for a desperate gambit. "I'm coming to you," she decided, already dragging herself toward his position while keeping the rifle trained on the scattered militia below. We moved together, or not at all. The distance between their positions was barely 30 meters, but for Olivia's wounded body, it might as well have been kilometers. Each movement sent fresh waves of agony through her leg and side, the bandages now soaked through with blood that left a dark trail across the rocky ground. Twice she paused to fire at militia members attempting to advance, the shots forcing them back into cover without confirming elimination. When she finally reached Alexei's position, the reality of their situation became starkly clear. The enemy sniper who had stalked her team with such deadly efficiency now lay pale and drawn against the boulder, his tactical gear saturated with blood from a chest wound that bubbled with each labored breath. "You look terrible," he managed, his accent thicker as shock began to set in. "Says the man with a collapsed lung," Olivia retorted, quickly assessing his wound. The bullet had entered just above his body armor, tearing through the upper chest with devastating effect. Without immediate medical intervention, his survival chances were minimal. "They're regrouping," Alexei warned, nodding toward the militia's position below. 2 minutes, maybe less. Olivia calculated their options with brutal honesty. Neither was capable of independent movement over difficult terrain. Their ammunition was limited, their physical condition deteriorating by the minute. Standard tactical doctrine offered no viable solution, which meant creating one from desperation and willpower. "The cash vehicles," she said suddenly, nodding toward the valley below where the arms operation continued. "If we can reach them." Alexei followed her gaze, understanding immediately. "Ambitious. They're over a kilometer away, mostly downhill. Gravity will help," Olivia replied with grim humor. One way or another, the plan took shape with the rapid clarity of combat necessity. Use their remaining ammunition to clear a path through the militia, then attempt to reach the vehicle staging area below. If successful, they could commandeer transportation and break through the perimeter before reinforcements arrived. "It's insane," Alexei observed, checking his sidearm with blood-slicked fingers. "I like it." Olivia secured the Chaytak across her back and helped Alexei to a semi-upright position, his arm draped across her shoulders despite their mutual wounds. Together they formed a grotesque parody of cooperation, former enemies united by circumstance and the universal soldier's determination to survive against impossible odds. "On 3, she said, bracing herself against the pain. 1, 2. The militia attacked before she reached 3. 2 fighters appeared at the edge of their position, weapons raised and shouting commands in a regional dialect. Olivia reacted with instinctive speed, her sidearm clearing its holster and firing twice in rapid succession. Both militia members fell, but the sound of approaching footsteps indicated the remaining fighters were converging on their location. "Time to go," she grunted, pulling Alexei upright despite his strangled gasp of pain. They moved as a single wounded entity, half dragging, half supporting each other across terrain that seemed designed to punish every step. Behind them, shouts and gunfire marked the militia's pursuit, bullets impacting rock and earth around their stumbling progress. The descent was both blessing and curse. Gravity accelerated their movement but made control nearly impossible. Twice they fell, each impact reopening wounds and drawing involuntary sounds of pain. Olivia's vision began to narrow, dark edges encroaching as blood loss took its toll, yet she maintained their course through sheer force of will. "They're gaining," Alexei warned, his voice barely audible over their labored breathing. Olivia checked their pursuers through the thermal scope, 2 militia members closing fast, using the terrain with practiced efficiency. She handed Alexei her sidearm. "Cover our rear. I'll handle what's ahead." They reached a natural choke point, a narrow passage between rock formations that offered momentary shelter and a defensible position. Olivia propped Alexei against the stone wall, positioning him to cover their back trail while she assessed the route ahead. The vehicle staging area was visible now, perhaps 400 meters below their position. 3 trucks and a modified technical with mounted weapons, guarded by a skeleton crew while the main force conducted arms transfers in the nearby cave complex. 4 guards, she reported, studying their movements through the scope. Minimal awareness, focused on the loading operation. Alexei fired twice, the shots echoing across the mountainside. 2 pursuers down. He managed, each word a visible effort. "But I'm out." Olivia handed him the Chaitak with its final round. "Make it count if needed. I'll clear the way forward." She moved with painful determination, each step measured against the rapidly dwindling reserves of her strength. The guards below remained unaware of the drama unfolding on the mountainside, their attention fixed on the more significant operation within the cave complex. Halfway to the vehicles, disaster struck. Olivia's wounded leg finally gave out, sending her tumbling down a scree slope in an uncontrolled slide that ended with her crashing into a boulder at the base. The impact drove the air from her lungs and sent a fresh wave of agony through her injuries, momentarily paralyzing her with its intensity. When her vision cleared, she found herself dangerously exposed, visible to both the vehicle guards and any militia still in pursuit. Worse, the fall had separated her from Alexei, leaving him stranded at the choke point above with minimal defense. One of the guards had noticed her fall, his posture suddenly alert as he raised his weapon and approached her position. Olivia remained motionless, feigning death while calculating the diminishing options available. Her sidearm was with Alexei, her combat knife accessible but ineffective against an armed opponent at distance. The guard advanced cautiously, his weapon trained on her seemingly lifeless form. When he was 3 meters away, Olivia exploded into action, a surge of movement that defied her injuries and caught the guard completely unprepared. She crossed the distance in a lunging tackle that drove them both to the ground, her combat knife already seeking the vulnerable gap beneath his protective vest. The guard fought with desperate strength, landing blows against her wounded side that sent stars across her vision. They rolled across the rocky ground, each seeking advantage in a contest where hesitation meant death. Olivia felt her strength ebbing with each passing second, the cumulative effect of blood loss and trauma threatening to overwhelm even her formidable will. In a final, desperate maneuver, she used the guard's own momentum against him, directing his weight over her body and directly onto her upturned knife. The blade slid home with sickening finality, the guard's struggles ceasing almost immediately as life fled his eyes. Olivia lay beneath the dead weight, struggling to find the strength to move. Her body screamed for rest, for surrender to the encroaching darkness that promised relief from pain. Only the knowledge that Alexei remained vulnerable above, that her team's mission remained incomplete, drove her to push the corpse aside and drag herself toward the nearest vehicle. The remaining guards had noticed the commotion and were approaching with weapons raised, shouting questions in their regional dialect. Olivia used the dead guard's body as momentary cover while she retrieved his sidearm and assessed the approaching threats. 3 guards, moving in a spread formation that limited her options for engagement. In her current condition, accuracy beyond point-blank range was questionable at best. She needed to reduce the distance and create confusion, tactics that depended on mobility she no longer possessed. The solution came with brutal simplicity. If she couldn't move to engage, she would force them to come to her. Olivia fired 3 rapid shots, not at the guards but at the nearest vehicle's fuel tank. The resulting explosion shattered the night's relative quiet, sending a fireball climbing into the sky and scattering debris across the staging area. The guards instinctively dove for cover, their attention momentarily diverted from her position. She used the distraction to drag herself toward the command vehicle, a modified SUV with communications equipment visible through its windows. If she could reach it, access its radio, contact might be possible with coalition forces conducting operations in adjacent sectors. The distance seemed impossible, 30 meters of exposed ground between her current position and potential salvation. Her body had reached its physiological limits, each movement now requiring conscious override of systems designed to shut down in response to trauma. "Keep moving," she whispered to herself, the words a mantra against encroaching unconsciousness. "One more meter. Just one more." Gunfire erupted behind her. Not the guards, weapons, but the distinctive crack of the Chetak rifle. Alexei had managed to reach a firing position overlooking the staging area and was providing cover, his final round eliminating one of the approaching guards with surgical precision. The remaining two scattered, seeking cover among the vehicles and equipment. Olivia continued her agonizing progress, leaving a trail of blood across the dusty ground that marked her passage like macabre breadcrumbs. 20 meters to the command vehicle. Then 15. Each increment purchased with pain and deteriorating consciousness. The guards had regrouped, advancing cautiously toward her position, with the confident patience of predators tracking wounded prey. At 10 meters from the vehicle, Olivia's strength finally failed. Her arms collapsed beneath her, muscles refusing commands despite her desperate will. She lay exposed and vulnerable, the sidearm still clutched in fingers too numb to maintain proper trigger discipline. One of the guards approached, his weapon trained on her prone form. He spoke something in his dialect, a question or command she couldn't comprehend through the roaring in her ears. When she made no response, he stepped closer, reaching down to roll her over with the barrel of his rifle. Olivia's last reserves of strength manifested in a single, explosive movement. As the guard's rifle contacted her shoulder, she grabbed the barrel with her left hand, simultaneously bringing up the sidearm with her right. The guard's eyes widened in surprise, the last expression to cross his face before Olivia's shot entered beneath his chin, the round traveling upward into his brainstem with instantly fatal effect. The final guard opened fire from cover, rounds impacting the ground around Olivia as she used the dead guard's body as a shield. She returned fire with mechanical precision, her combat training operating on autonomic function while higher reasoning began to fade. 2 shots, then 3. The guard's returned fire becoming increasingly desperate as he realized his vulnerability. When her sidearm clicked empty, Olivia knew she had reached the end of her resources. The guard would realize her vulnerability within moments, would advance to confirm his kill with confidence born of superior position and condition. Instead, the night air filled with a distinctive thump-thump-thump of helicopter rotors. Through vision that tunneled and wavered, Olivia saw powerful searchlights sweep the staging area, pinning the final guard in their unforgiving glare. The distinctive shape of a coalition combat helicopter descended into view, its weapons systems tracking and eliminating the exposed threat with clinical efficiency. More helicopters appeared, deploying rapid response teams that secured the perimeter with practiced coordination. Medical personnel moved among them, identifying casualties and prioritizing treatment with the ordered urgency of combat medicine. As hands reached for her, applying pressure to wounds and establishing IV access, Olivia managed a single question through lips gone numb with shock. "Alexei?" The medic working on her leg glanced up briefly. "The sniper on the ridge? Already being treated. You both look like hell, but you'll live." The confirmation released something within Olivia, a tension held so long it had become part of her physical structure. As medication flowed through her veins, dulling pain and bringing blessed clarity, she realized what had happened. Marcus had received her emergency transmission. Despite protocol dictating no return for compromised operators, he had convinced command to authorize a rescue operation based on the intelligence they'd gathered. The arms cache was being secured, the mission completed despite impossible odds. As they lifted her into the helicopter, Olivia caught sight of another stretcher being loaded. Alexei, pale but conscious, his eyes finding hers across the distance between them. No words passed between them, none were necessary. They had been enemies, then reluctant allies, unified by the universal soldier's understanding that survival sometimes depends on trusting the devil you know against the one you don't. The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply to clear the mountainside as it began its journey toward the nearest medical facility. Below, coalition forces continued securing the arms cache, the intelligence Olivia's team had gathered now translating into operational success. In the artificial brightness of the helicopter's interior, surrounded by medical equipment and the reassuring presence of trained personnel, Olivia finally surrendered to unconsciousness. Her last thought was not of the mission, not of survival against impossible odds, but of the strange symmetry that had saved her life. Shot twice by an enemy sniper, then saved by using that same enemy's weapon and expertise. Life had a way of creating patterns that defied conventional understanding. Sometimes survival meant recognizing those patterns and adapting to their unexpected implications, even when everything you'd been taught suggested otherwise. As darkness claimed her consciousness, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she would wake again. Too stubborn to die, too determined to surrender. These were the qualities that had made her phantom in the field, and they would carry her through whatever challenges lay ahead in recovery. The mission was complete. Her team was safe. Everything else was just details to be addressed when strength returned. For now, it was enough to rest, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from recognizing when temporary alliance serves a greater purpose than continued conflict. The fluorescent lights of Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany cast an unforgiving glow across Olivia's face as she studied her reflection in the small bathroom mirror. 3 weeks of intensive medical care had stabilized her condition, but the woman staring back barely resembled the elite operator who had departed for Afghanistan a month earlier. Hollowed cheeks, skin pale from blood loss and limited sunlight, eyes that seemed to have witnessed decades rather than days. Trauma had accelerated time's passage across her features. With methodical care, she unwrapped the bandage covering her side, revealing the angry red line where the first bullet had torn through flesh. The wound was healing well, according to the medical staff, though well was a relative term when discussing injuries that had nearly claimed her life. The entry and exit points were clean, the risk of infection effectively managed through aggressive antibiotic protocols. The surrounding tissue remained discolored and tender, but the surgical team had done exceptional work. The thigh wound was more problematic. The bullet had severed muscle tissue and nicked her femoral artery, requiring emergency vascular surgery upon arrival at the field hospital. The orthopedic surgeon had been brutally honest during yesterday's evaluation. Full recovery was possible, but not guaranteed. Physical therapy would be extensive, possibly spanning a year or more before she might regain previous functionality, if she regained it at all. Olivia reapplied fresh bandages with practiced efficiency, her fingers moving through the procedure with muscle memory developed over 3 weeks of self-care. The medical staff had initially insisted on handling all wound management, but she had gradually reclaimed these small aspects of independence, first changing the dressings herself, then managing her medication schedule, eventually negotiating limited mobility around the secure medical wing. Small victories in a battle for autonomy that stretched far beyond physical recovery. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Mercer? You decent? The colonel's here to see you." Olivia quickly adjusted her hospital-issued attire. "Give me 2 minutes, then send him in." She maneuvered carefully to the bedside chair, a more dignified position for receiving visitors than the hospital bed with its implications of weakness and dependency. The walking cane prescribed by physical therapy stood within reach, though she avoided using it when others were present. Pride, perhaps, or the instinctive resistance to displaying vulnerability that had been ingrained through years of special operations training. Colonel James Reynolds entered the room with the measured confidence that had made him an effective commander of Task Force Obsidian. His uniform was impeccable as always, decorations understated yet impressive to those who understood their significance. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm and offered a respectful nod rather than the handshake protocol would normally dictate. "Mercer, you're looking better." "Respectfully, sir, that wouldn't be difficult. I looked like death warmed over last time you visited." The hint of a smile crossed Reynolds' face. "Fair assessment. The medical team reports significant improvement in your condition. How do you feel?" Olivia considered the question with the honesty it deserved. "Physically, I'm healing. Everything else is—" She let the sentence trail off, unwilling to articulate the complex psychological landscape she navigated daily. Reynolds nodded, understanding the unspoken. Combat trauma created wounds beyond the physical, invisible injuries that often proved more challenging to heal than damaged tissue and broken bones. "I've brought something that might help with everything else," he said, opening the portfolio and extracting a thin file folder with classified markings. "The intelligence your team gathered has been fully processed. Thought you might want to see the results." He handed her the folder, which she accepted with carefully concealed eagerness. For 3 weeks, she had existed in an information vacuum, receiving medical updates and occasional personal messages from team members, but nothing substantive about the mission outcomes or operational developments following her extraction. The file contained satellite imagery, intelligence summaries, and after-action reports documenting a major coalition operation launched against the arms network her team had identified. Multiple cache sites had been neutralized, supply lines disrupted, and key personnel captured. The operation's success had significantly degraded insurgent capabilities throughout the region, potentially saving dozens of coalition lives in the process. "Your reconnaissance made this possible," quote, Reynolds stated simply. The intelligence was precise, actionable, and arrived at a critical juncture. The Joint Chiefs sent formal commendation. Olivia absorbed this information with complicated emotions. Professional satisfaction at mission success warred with the knowledge of what that success had cost. Not just her injuries, but the trauma inflicted on her team, particularly Torres, who remained in recovery from his shoulder wound. "And the weapons supplier?" she asked, scanning the documents for specific mention of the foreign contractor who had orchestrated the arms pipeline. Reynolds hesitated briefly. "That's where things get interesting. Intelligence suggests the operation was bankrolled by elements connected to Eastern European private military corporations with complex political entanglements. We're still unraveling those connections." "And Alexei, the sniper?" The question hung between them for a moment, neither acknowledging the unusual nature of her interest in an enemy combatant who had nearly killed her. "Recovering under guard at a secure medical facility," Reynolds finally replied. "His condition stabilized after surgery. Beyond that, his status is classified." Olivia nodded, unsurprised by the limited information. Alexei would be considered a high-value intelligence asset, a foreign military contractor with potential connections to various non-state actors and possibly state-sponsored operations. His debriefing would be handled by specialized units far removed from her chain of command. "There's something else," Reynolds continued, extracting another document from his portfolio. "Your medical evaluation and prognosis." This was the conversation she had been dreading since regaining consciousness. Special operations units maintained exacting physical standards, standards her injuries might prevent her from meeting again regardless of rehabilitation efforts. The unspoken question hung between them. What became of an elite operator who could no longer operate at elite levels? "The board has reviewed your case extensively," Reynolds began, his tone carefully neutral. "Your injuries are significant, but not career-ending, assuming you're willing to consider alternative career tracks within the organization." "Alternative tracks," Olivia repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Desk duty, analysis, training supervision. Specialized roles leveraging your field experience and technical expertise," Reynolds corrected. "Your knowledge of ballistic systems and reconnaissance protocols is unmatched within the task force. There are positions where that knowledge would be invaluable." Olivia knew he was right, knew the logical path forward involved accepting these realities and adapting accordingly. Yet something within her rebelled against the implicit finality, the suggestion that her days in the field were conclusively over. "I need time to consider the options, sir." Reynolds nodded, having clearly anticipated this response. "Take the time you need, but know this. Whatever path you choose, your place in this organization remains secure. You've more than earned that security." After Reynolds departed, Olivia remained in the chair, the classified documents spread across her lap as she processed their implications. The mission had succeeded. Lives had been saved. By any objective measure, the operation represented a significant victory despite the personal cost she had paid. Why then did it feel so hollow? 3 days later, Olivia was completing her morning physical therapy routine when the rehabilitation specialist informed her she had another visitor. Expecting Marcus, or possibly one of the unit's psychological counselors, she was caught entirely off guard when a woman in civilian business attire entered the therapy room. "Ms. Mercer, I'm Catherine Voss, Director of Advanced Systems at Artemis Defense Technologies. I was hoping we might speak privately." Olivia studied the newcomer with professional assessment. Mid-40s, poised yet alert, with the subtle situational awareness that suggested military or intelligence background before transitioning to the private sector. Her credentials appeared legitimate, though Olivia noted Reynolds must have authorized this unusual visit given the secure nature of the medical facility. "I'm in the middle of therapy," Olivia replied, continuing her resistance exercise despite the interruption. "I can see that," Voss acknowledged, seeming unperturbed by the cool reception. "And I'm impressed by your commitment to recovery. That determination is precisely why I'm here." Something in her tone caught Olivia's attention. Not sympathy or the careful encouragement offered by medical staff, but a matter-of-fact assessment delivered as one professional to another. "You have 15 minutes, Olivia decided, nodding to the physical therapist who discreetly withdrew to give them privacy. Voss wasted no time on pleasantries. Artemis is developing next-generation ballistic compensation systems for extreme environment deployment. We're seeking someone with practical field experience to consult on the project, specifically, someone who understands the real-world application of theoretical ballistics in hostile conditions. There are dozens of qualified ballistics experts in the defense sector," Olivia pointed out, shifting to the next exercise in her rehabilitation sequence. "Experts who understand the mathematics, yes. What we need is someone who has actually made the shot when it counted, who understands the human factors that no algorithm can fully capture." Olivia continued her exercises, giving no outward indication of interest despite her internal curiosity. "Why me specifically?" Voss smiled slightly. "Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Mercer. Your shot groupings at Snow Ridge Tactical Range have become something of a legend in certain circles. 3 rounds within half an inch at 1,000 meters in Arctic conditions using non-standard equipment? That's not just skill. That's an intuitive understanding of ballistic principles that can't be taught in any classroom." The reference to Snow Ridge froze Olivia mid-motion. That training exercise had occurred nearly 2 years ago, an evaluation that had turned into an unexpected demonstration of her capabilities, when arrogant instructors underestimated her based on appearances and non-regulation equipment. The incident had never appeared in official reports, existing only as range gossip and professional reputation. "You've done your homework," she acknowledged, resuming her exercise with careful control. "Thoroughly," Voss confirmed, "including reviewing your recent field operation to the extent such information is accessible to those with appropriate clearance." This revelation sharpened Olivia's attention. Very few people outside direct military channels would have access to details about the Afghanistan operation, regardless of security clearance. Artemis must have significant government contracts and high-level connections to obtain even redacted versions of those reports. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked, setting aside the resistance band and reaching for her water bottle. "A consulting position during your recovery period. Your expertise would help refine systems that will eventually protect operators in the field. Once your rehabilitation is complete, we discuss more permanent arrangements, if you're interested." The offer was intriguing, though Olivia maintained her neutral expression. "And if I'm not interested?" Voss shrugged slightly. "Then you continue your military career as planned. This isn't a rescue mission, Ms. Mercer. It's a professional opportunity based on your unique qualifications. The choice is entirely yours." After Voss departed, leaving detailed contact information and a formal offer letter, Olivia returned to her room to consider this unexpected development. The timing seemed almost too convenient, a private sector opportunity appearing precisely when her military future faced uncertainty. Yet the technological focus aligned perfectly with her specialized skills, offering meaningful work during recovery without demanding physical capabilities she might never fully regain. She was still contemplating the offer when her secure tablet chimed with an incoming video call from Marcus. His familiar face appeared on screen, looking more rested than when she'd last seen him immediately following the extraction operation. "You look like hell, boss," he greeted her with the easy familiarity developed through multiple deployments together. "Charming as always, Chen. How's Torres? Recovering well. Shoulder reconstruction was successful, though he's facing similar questions about future field eligibility." Marcus paused, studying her through the video connection. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one that says you're plotting something inadvisable. I've seen it before, every questionable decision you've made in the field." Despite herself, Olivia smiled slightly. "Just weighing options. A private defense contractor approached me today. Consulting position during recovery, possibly more permanent after." Marcus whistled softly. "Moving to the dark side? Better money, I hear. Fewer people shooting at you, generally speaking." "It's not about the money." She hesitated, organizing thoughts she'd barely articulated to herself. "It's about purpose. Effectiveness. If I can't return to field operations. You're thinking you might do more good developing systems that protect those who can. Marcus finished for her. Makes sense. Your brain was always your most dangerous weapon anyway. The conversation shifted to team updates and operational gossip, but Marcus's observation lingered after they disconnected. Her most valuable contribution had never been physical prowess alone. It was the integration of technical knowledge with practical application, the ability to translate theoretical ballistics into real-world effectiveness under extreme conditions. Perhaps there were multiple paths to serving the same ultimate purpose. 2 days later, a nurse delivered an unexpected package to Olivia's room, a secure tablet with biometric authentication that recognized her fingerprint immediately upon contact. The screen activated to display a single video file with a message indicator showing it originated from a secured military channel. The video opened on a sterile hospital room not unlike her own, though with noticeably higher security evident in the background. Alexei sat propped against pillows, his complexion gray but alert, with medical monitoring equipment surrounding his bed. He looked directly into the camera with the same calculating gaze she remembered from their desperate alliance on the mountainside. "Olivia," he began without preamble, his accent more pronounced through what appeared to be pain medication. "They tell me you survived. Good. I would have been disappointed to lose such an interesting adversary." He shifted slightly, wincing at the movement. "They also tell me you asked about my condition. Curious behavior towards someone who tried to kill you. Perhaps we understand each other better than either would admit." A shadow of something like respect crossed his features. "We are not so different, you and I. Professional soldiers following different orders but operating by similar principles. The difference is you still believe in causes greater than yourself. I lost that luxury years ago." He leaned closer to the camera, his expression suddenly intense. "A piece of advice from someone who walked your path before diverging. When recovery is complete, when they offer you choices about your future, remember what happened on that mountain. We survived not because of our physical strength, but because of adaptability, the willingness to reassess when circumstances changed." Alexei paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "The organizations we serve view us as assets with limited operational lifespans. Your value to them changes the moment your physical capabilities diminish, regardless of what knowledge exists in your mind. Remember that when making your decisions." The video ended abruptly, leaving Olivia staring at a blank screen that eventually displayed a security notification indicating the file had been automatically deleted after viewing. She sat motionless, processing this unexpected communication from a man who had nearly killed her, then fought alongside her, and now offered advice that struck uncomfortably close to her current dilemma. That night, sleep eluded her as competing futures played through her mind. The military path offered familiarity, continued service within an organization she respected, but likely relegated to support roles that utilized her experience without demanding peak physical performance. The private sector alternative presented by Artemis promised different challenges, developing systems that might save lives without directly engaging in operations herself. Both paths possessed merit. Both allowed her to contribute meaningfully despite her injuries. The question wasn't which path was objectively better, but which aligned more closely with her evolving understanding of her own capabilities and purpose. Dawn found her at the window, watching light gradually illuminate the medical facility's carefully maintained grounds. The decision had crystallized during those quiet hours. Not with dramatic revelation, but with the calm certainty that came from aligning internal truth with external action. When Colonel Reynolds arrived for their scheduled meeting later that morning, Olivia was dressed in the physical therapy attire that had become her uniform during recovery, seated in the visitor's chair rather than the wheelchair medical staff had recommended for longer conversations. "You've reached a decision," Reynolds observed, noting her posture and the resolved expression she made no attempt to conceal. "I have, sir. I'm requesting administrative leave during recovery, with permission to accept a civilian consulting position with Artemis Defense Technologies. Once medical rehabilitation is complete, I'll reassess my status and future with the task force." Reynolds studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "This is about more than physical recovery, isn't it?" "Yes, sir. It's about effectiveness, about contribution. My skills have always extended beyond physical capability, but I need space to rediscover how those skills translate after these injuries." And you believe this private sector position provides that space? Olivia nodded. It allows me to contribute meaningfully during recovery while maintaining the option to return to service if rehabilitation progresses as hoped. It's not abandoning my commitment. It's fulfilling it through an alternative path while circumstances demand adaptation. Reynolds considered this, then nodded slowly. I'll approve the administrative leave. The task force will maintain your security clearance and position during this period. He paused, then added with uncharacteristic informality. For what it's worth, I think it's the right decision. Adaptation has always been your strength, Mercer. This is just another form of adaptation. 2 weeks later, Olivia stood at the entrance to Artemis Defense Technologies' Advanced Systems Division, leaning slightly on the carbon fiber cane that represented both limitation and progress in her recovery journey. The modern glass building reflected morning sunlight, its architecture suggesting the forward-thinking approach that had attracted her to this temporary position. Catherine Voss greeted her in the lobby, professional warmth replacing the calculated assessment of their initial meeting. Welcome to Artemis, Ms. Mercer. Your security credentials are processed, workstation prepared, and the team is eager to benefit from your expertise. As they walked toward the research division, Voss outlined the ballistic compensation system currently under development, technology designed to account for environmental variables that affected long-distance accuracy in extreme conditions. The project aligned perfectly with Olivia's specialized knowledge, offering an opportunity to translate field experience into systems that might eventually save lives. The development team has created impressive algorithms, Voss explained as they entered a large laboratory space filled with testing equipment and simulation stations. What they lack is the human element, the instinctive understanding that comes from having made those calculations under fire. Olivia surveyed the equipment with professional assessment, already noting modifications that might improve field application. The best technology adapts to the operator, not the other way around. That's where most systems fail. They're designed by people who've never had to use them when it matters most. Exactly why you're here, Voss confirmed, gesturing toward a workstation prominently positioned among the development team's area. This is yours for the duration. The team has been instructed that you have final authority on practical application parameters. As introductions began with the engineering staff, Olivia felt something shift within her. Not resignation to a lesser role, but recognition of a different kind of purpose. Her injuries had closed one door, but opened another, offering a path that utilized her most valuable assets, while her body fought to recover its former capabilities. Whether that recovery ultimately proved complete or partial, whether she eventually returned to field operations, or continued this new direction, the core truth remained unchanged. Adaptation wasn't surrender. It was evolution. The mission continued, even when the battlefield changed. She had survived the mountain not because of physical strength alone, but because of her willingness to reassess, adapt, and overcome when circumstances demanded. That same willingness would carry her through this recovery, and whatever lay beyond. The engineer explaining the current ballistic modeling system paused, noticing her momentary distraction. Is everything all right, Ms. Mercer? Olivia refocused on the present moment, on the opportunity before her to shape technology that would protect future operators facing the same dangers she had survived. Everything's fine, she replied with newfound certainty. Let's get to work. 6 months passed like water through cupped hands, tangible yet impossible to truly contain. Olivia's work at Artemis Defense Technologies had evolved from consulting to directing the Advanced Ballistics Division, her expertise transforming theoretical models into practical applications that were already being field-tested by special operations units across 3 continents. Her injury rehabilitation progressed with the same disciplined focus she applied to every challenge, each painful therapy session marking incremental progress toward recovery. The executive conference room at Artemis headquarters overlooked the Potomac River, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Washington Monument in the distance, as Olivia concluded her presentation to the company's senior leadership and visiting military observers. The RX-7 compensation system has demonstrated 38% improved accuracy in extreme weather conditions during controlled testing, she explained, gesturing toward the projection displaying statistical analyses. More significantly, the system's intuitive interface reduces operator cognitive load during high-stress scenarios, allowing focus to remain on mission-critical observation rather than technical adjustments. Catherine Voss nodded approvingly from her position at the head of the conference table. Implementation timeline? Production units ready for deployment within 4 months, Olivia confirmed. Field manuals and training protocols are being finalized concurrently. We've incorporated feedback from the preliminary tests to ensure the system remains effective across diverse environmental conditions. Among the military observers, General William Harrison leaned forward with professional interest. As commander of the Joint Special Operations Task Force, his endorsement would significantly influence adoption rates across multiple service branches. Impressive work, Ms. Mercer, he acknowledged. The adaptive algorithms address several limitations we've encountered in current systems. I'm particularly interested in the Arctic performance metrics. That's been a persistent challenge for our northern deployment teams. Olivia advanced the presentation to detailed cold weather testing results. The system was specifically designed to excel in extreme temperature ranges. We conducted extensive testing at facilities similar to Snow Ridge, incorporating variables like ice crystal formation on optical surfaces and rapid temperature fluctuations. A slight smile crossed the general's face at the mention of Snow Ridge, an acknowledgement of her history there that required no further elaboration. I look forward to the field implementation reports. If they confirm these laboratory results, the RX-7 will represent a significant advancement in operational capability. As the meeting concluded and attendees filtered from the conference room, Olivia remained behind, collecting her materials while mentally reviewing the presentation for potential improvements. She had learned to be her own harshest critic, constantly refining both technical specifications and communication strategies to ensure maximum effectiveness. Catherine Voss approached as the room emptied, her expression reflecting both professional satisfaction and personal concern. Another successful presentation. The military contingent was clearly impressed. They should be, Olivia replied without false modesty. The system works. It will save lives when deployed correctly. Voss studied her for a moment. You've exceeded every expectation since joining Artemis. The board is preparing a formal offer for a permanent executive position. Director of Field Applications, reporting directly to me with full departmental authority. The offer wasn't unexpected. Olivia's temporary consulting role had expanded naturally as her contributions demonstrated value beyond initial projections. What had begun as rehabilitation employment had evolved into meaningful work that leveraged her unique combination of field experience and technical expertise. I appreciate the confidence, she responded carefully. My administrative leave from active duty expires in 6 weeks. I've been considering my options. And those options include returning to field operations? Voss asked, her tone neutral but eyes sharp with assessment. Your rehabilitation has progressed remarkably well, but medical reports suggest full recovery remains uncertain. Olivia instinctively straightened, conscious of the almost imperceptible limp that persisted despite months of intensive therapy. The cane was gone, replaced by carefully disguised orthotic supports and daily strength training, but perfect restoration of her previous physical capabilities remained elusive. The final evaluation is scheduled next week, she acknowledged. My physical therapist believes I'll meet minimum qualification standards for limited field deployment, though specific parameters remain to be determined. Voss nodded, respecting the professional boundary implicit in Olivia's response. The offer remains open regardless of that evaluation's outcome. Your value to Artemis extends far beyond this single project. Consider it carefully before making your decision. After Voss departed, Olivia moved to the windows overlooking the river, watching afternoon sunlight play across the water's surface while contemplating the crossroads before her. The military path offered return to the life she had known. Operational deployment alongside teammates who had become family through shared experience and sacrifice. The corporate alternative presented at Artemis promised different but equally meaningful impact. Developing systems that protected those same operators while allowing her to leverage expertise that transcended physical limitations. Both paths possessed merit. Both allowed her to serve causes greater than herself. The question wasn't which path others expected her to choose, but which aligned most authentically with her evolving identity after trauma had forced reassessment of previously unquestioned assumptions. The medical evaluation at Walter Reed proceeded with clinical efficiency, a battery of physical assessments and performance metrics designed to quantify recovery against standardized requirements for active deployment. Colonel Reynolds observed from the sidelines, his presence unusual for such evaluations but indicative of Task Force Obsidian's continued interest in her potential return. Maximum effort on this final sequence. The evaluating physician instructed as Olivia prepared for the endurance assessment, a grueling combination of speed, strength, and sustained exertion that most closely approximated field operation requirements. She completed the sequence with disciplined precision, pushing through the familiar burning in her reconstructed thigh muscle and the persistent ache in her side where nerve damage had never fully resolved. When the final measurements were recorded, she stood breathing heavily but controlled, awaiting the verdict that would influence her future trajectory. The physician reviewed the results with professional detachment before meeting her gaze directly. Your recovery exceeds projections across most assessment categories. Endurance metrics remain approximately 82% of your pre-injury baseline, with strength assessments at 78% for the affected muscle groups. These figures qualify you for limited field deployment under specific operational parameters. Limited deployment. The qualification echoed in Olivia's mind, simultaneously victory and constraint. She had pushed her recovery beyond medical expectations, yet still faced restrictions that would fundamentally alter her role within any operational team. Colonel Reynolds joined them as the physician completed his evaluation. The numbers are impressive, Mercer. Few recover to those levels after injuries of this severity. But not enough for full operational status, she stated, requiring explicit confirmation of what the metrics implied. Correct, the physician confirmed. You're cleared for deployment in advisory and support capacities, but direct combat operations and extended reconnaissance missions remain restricted due to endurance limitations and potential vulnerability in environments requiring sustained physical performance. Reynolds waited until the physician departed before addressing her directly. This outcome doesn't surprise you. It wasn't a question. Olivia had always possessed ruthless self-awareness, particularly regarding her own capabilities and limitations. The evaluation merely quantified what her body had been communicating throughout rehabilitation. Recovery would be substantial but incomplete, requiring adaptation rather than restoration of previous operational parameters. No, she acknowledged. The trajectory has been clear for several months. I pushed for maximum recovery, but certain limitations appear permanent. Yet you continued pursuing reinstatement, Reynolds observed. Why? The question deserved honesty. Because I needed certainty. Needed to know I had explored every possibility before making decisions about the future. Reynolds nodded, understanding the warrior's mentality that demanded absolute commitment to recovery before accepting limitation. And now that you have that certainty? Olivia considered the question carefully, examining her emotional response to the evaluation results. There was disappointment, certainly, the natural reaction to confirmed limitations after months of disciplined effort to overcome them. Yet beneath that surface response lay something unexpected, not resignation, but clarity. Now I can move forward without wondering what might have been, she replied. Make decisions based on reality rather than hope or wishful thinking. Task Force Obsidian would welcome your return in a training and advisory capacity, Reynolds offered. Your experience remains invaluable, particularly in developing the next generation of reconnaissance specialists. The offer was genuine and respectful, acknowledging her capabilities while accommodating her limitations. 6 months earlier, she might have perceived it as professional charity, a consolation prize for a damaged operator no longer capable of elite performance. Now, with perspective gained through her work at Artemis, she recognized it as something different, evolving contribution rather than diminished value. I appreciate the offer, Colonel. I'll consider it alongside other options before my administrative leave concludes. That evening, Olivia's secure tablet chimed with an incoming call from Marcus. Their communication had remained consistent throughout her rehabilitation and corporate tenure, bridging the gap between military and civilian worlds with the easy camaraderie developed through shared experience. Heard about the evaluation results, he said without preamble when his face appeared on screen. 82% is damn impressive. The docs were betting on 65 when you left Germany. Olivia smiled slightly at his characteristic directness. Not enough for full reinstatement, but enough for limited deployment, he countered. Reynolds is already creating a specialized role, reconnaissance training supervision with occasional field advisory capacity. Torres got similar clearance last month. The mention of Torres, similarly injured during that fateful mission, sparked an unexpected surge of emotion. Their parallel journeys of recovery created connection despite physical distance, a shared understanding of adaptation following trauma that transcended ordinary communication. "How's he adapting to the new parameters?" she asked. "Better than expected," Marcus replied. "Found his niche training infiltration techniques to the new operators. Says it's satisfying watching them develop skills that might keep them alive when it matters." The conversation shifted to task force updates and operational developments, but Marcus's description of Torres lingered in Olivia's thoughts long after they disconnected. Found his niche. Adaptation rather than resignation. Purpose reconfigured rather than abandoned. 3 days later, Olivia entered Catherine Voss's office with the composed certainty that came from thorough self-examination. The Artemis executive looked up from her computer, immediately noting the resolved expression that suggested decisions had been finalized. "You've reached your conclusion," Voss observed, gesturing toward the visitor's chair. "I have," Olivia confirmed, taking the offered seat. "I'm accepting the director position with one condition: flexibility to consult with military training programs on a limited basis, particularly those involving reconnaissance specialists and advanced targeting systems." Voss considered this request, her expression thoughtful. "Maintaining connections with your former community while establishing leadership here. It's an unusual arrangement, but potentially beneficial for Artemis's relationship with military clients. I believe we can accommodate that condition." "Then we have an agreement," Olivia stated simply. "May I ask what ultimately influenced your decision?" "You clearly had viable options in both sectors. The question deserved a considered response." Olivia paused, organizing thoughts that had crystallized during recent days of intense reflection. "I realized I was asking the wrong question," she finally explained. "I kept focusing on what I could no longer do rather than what I'm uniquely positioned to accomplish. My value was never solely in physical capability. It was in the integration of technical knowledge with practical application, the ability to bridge theoretical and operational realities." She gestured toward the prototype RX-7 system displayed on a pedestal near Voss's desk. "That system will save lives, not just by improving accuracy but by reducing operator cognitive load during critical scenarios. The soldiers using it will never know my name, will never realize the field experience that shaped its design. That anonymity is part of what makes it meaningful." Voss nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her expression. "You're still protecting your team, just through different means." "Exactly. The battlefield changed, but the mission remains the same: keeping operators alive and effective under the most challenging conditions imaginable." The transition from military operator to corporate director occurred with surprising smoothness. Olivia's leadership style, direct, precise, and focused on practical outcomes, translated effectively to the corporate environment while maintaining authentic connection to her military foundations. She assembled a development team that balanced theoretical expertise with practical application, insisting on regular field testing and operator feedback throughout the design process. 4 months after accepting the permanent position, she stood in the shadows of an observation platform at Quantico's advanced training facility, watching special operations candidates conduct night infiltration exercises using equipment her team had developed. The RX-7 targeting system had been adopted across multiple special operations units, with preliminary field reports confirming the improved accuracy and reduced operator fatigue predicted during development. Colonel Reynolds joined her at the railing, both of them observing the exercise in professional silence for several minutes before he spoke. "Your system is making a difference. The qualification rates for advanced targeting certification have increased 17% since implementation." Olivia nodded, satisfaction evident despite her characteristically reserved expression. "The next generation incorporates additional improvements based on initial deployment feedback. Lighter weight, extended battery life, enhanced performance in humidity extremes." "You found your path," Reynolds observed, the statement carrying no judgment, merely acknowledgement of a professional evolution he had witnessed throughout her recovery journey. "Different path, same destination," Olivia corrected. The objective was never about personal achievement or career advancement. It was about contribution, using whatever capabilities remained available to protect those still in the field. Reynolds studied her profile in the darkness, noting the quiet confidence that had replaced the desperate determination of early recovery. "Some of our best operators never fully understood that distinction. They defined themselves through physical capability rather than purpose, making them vulnerable when injury or age inevitably altered those capabilities. "I had good advisors," Olivia acknowledged, thinking of Marcus's steady friendship, Torres's parallel journey, and surprisingly, Alexei's unexpected insight during their brief communication. Each had contributed to her understanding that adaptation represented evolution rather than surrender. The exercise concluded below them, operators securing equipment and conducting preliminary after-action discussions before dispersing toward the base facilities. Among them, Olivia recognized Torres moving with the slightly modified gait that reflected his own injury and recovery, different yet effective, adapted rather than diminished. "Will you join us for the debriefing?" Reynolds asked. "Your perspective on the system's field performance would be valuable." "Of course," Olivia agreed, moving toward the stairway with the balanced stride she had developed through months of rehabilitation. Not the same movement pattern as before her injury, but one that served its purpose with reliability and controlled precision. As they descended toward the training facility, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this integration point between military and corporate worlds. The sniper's bullets that had torn through her body on that Afghan mountainside might have ended her operational career, but they had simultaneously created space for evolution that would ultimately protect countless operators facing similar dangers. The physical therapist who had guided her recovery had often repeated a phrase that initially seemed like empty encouragement, but eventually revealed deeper truth. Adaptation isn't compromise, it's intelligent response to changed conditions. Olivia had adapted, not by surrendering to limitation, but by recognizing new pathways to fulfill the same fundamental purpose that had always driven her service. The mission continued, even when the battlefield changed. The contribution remained meaningful, even when the methods evolved. In the debriefing room, she joined Torres and the training team, immediately engaging in technical discussion about the targeting system's performance during the night exercise. Their shared experience, both as former operators and as individuals who had navigated recovery from career-altering injuries, created unspoken understanding that enhanced their effectiveness as advisors to the next generation. The system performed well in the heavy vegetation sections, Torres noted, referencing areas where traditional targeting systems struggled with multiple overlapping heat signatures. Adaptive focusing maintained target isolation despite the environmental interference. Olivia nodded, already mentally cataloging potential refinements based on the operational feedback. "We're developing enhanced algorithms for exactly those scenarios. The next update will incorporate machine learning that progressively adapts to specific environmental challenges based on operator usage patterns." As the discussion continued, Olivia recognized the unique position she now occupied, neither fully military nor entirely corporate, but occupying a critical integration point between worlds that often struggled to communicate effectively. Her experience in both realms allowed her to translate between them, ensuring technological development remained grounded in operational reality, while military application leveraged corporate innovation efficiently. The sniper's bullets had struck twice, changing her life's trajectory with violent finality. Yet she had not merely survived those impacts. She had transformed them into catalysts for evolution that extended far beyond personal recovery. The targeting systems she now developed would save lives she would never know, protect operations she would never witness, ensure successes that would never carry her name. And that, she realized with quiet certainty, was the most meaningful victory possible. Not the temporary triumph of individual achievement, but the lasting impact of contribution that transcended personal recognition or reward. Later that evening, as she reviewed preliminary designs for the next-generation targeting system in her hotel room, her secure tablet chimed with an incoming message from an unfamiliar source. The encryption signature suggested classified military channels, though the sender remained unidentified. The message contained only a short video file and required triple biometric authentication before playback. When the screen finally activated, Alexei's face appeared, older and more weathered than during their previous communication, but unmistakably the same person who had both hunted and ultimately fought alongside her on that Afghan mountainside. "Olivia," he began without preamble, "interesting how paths continue intersecting despite geographic separation. Your targeting system has attracted attention far beyond American military circles. Impressive work. particularly the environmental adaptation algorithms. He shifted slightly, revealing an office environment rather than the medical facility that had framed their last communication. I've been monitoring your professional evolution with interest. The transition from operator to developer appears to suit you, perhaps because you never confused the method with the mission. A slight smile crossed his face, not warm, but respectful. We remain technical adversaries, of course. Different employers, different objectives. But I thought you might appreciate knowing your work is recognized even by those who once aimed through a scope at your position. Adaptation suits you better than it did me. The video ended abruptly, the file automatically deleting itself after playback as classified communications typically did. Olivia sat motionless, processing this unexpected contact from a man whose bullets had simultaneously ended one career path and inadvertently created another. The message confirmed what intelligence reports had occasionally suggested. Alexei had survived his injuries and returned to some operational capacity, likely in private military contracting or specialized security roles that leveraged his unique skill set. Like her, he had adapted following trauma, though perhaps with different motivation and through different channels. Their paths had intersected violently on that mountainside, then briefly aligned during their desperate fight for survival. Now they had diverged again, operating in parallel worlds that occasionally touched at the edges of global security operations. Different loyalties, different employers, but united by the shared experience of adaptation following life-altering injury. Olivia closed the secure tablet and returned to her design work, the unexpected communication neither disrupting nor distracting from her purpose. Whatever Alexei's current role or motivation, his message merely confirmed what she had already discovered through her own journey. True strength lay not in resisting change, but in channeling it toward continued purpose. The sniper's bullets had indeed hit her twice, changing her life's trajectory with violent finality, but she had used his own scope, his own perspective, to find a new target more meaningful than she could have imagined before injury forced adaptation. The path forward wasn't about reclaiming what was lost, but about discovering what remained possible when limitation became invitation to evolution, rather than sentence to diminishment. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.